Welcome to Tochi Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. Ifunanya had long thought she had married into the dream life, one laced with gold-plated luxury, elite connections, and wealth unimaginable. But dreams have edges, and hers had started to bleed. The mansion she once paraded on social media became hauntingly silent at night, as though the walls themselves were listening. Late into the night, she began to hear low voices behind Uche's study door. Men would come in dressed in black, not the type that reeked of fashion, but the kind that smelled like secrets. Their eyes were never kind, and they always avoided hers. One night, unable to contain her curiosity, she crept out of their bedroom, barefoot, and leaned against the thick mahogany door of Uche's office. The word cargo, next drop, and don't let them cry too loud, made her heart twist. Something inside her gut screamed that what she heard wasn't business as usual. It was something darker, something rotten. She knew Uche had money, but she never knew from where. He had told her it was land, investments, and oil deals, and she had believed him. After all, how else could a man throw an emergency wedding in 2 days and pay off every media outlet to erase the bride swap story that rocked their family? But now, her hands trembled as she backed away from the door. The look Uche gave her the next morning when she asked why men visited so late was one she had never seen before, cold, flat, and empty. "Don't ask me about what feeds you," he had said, sipping his tea as if she was nothing but a wall decoration. From that day, she noticed changes, tiny ones at first. The driver that used to take her out was suddenly on leave. Her calls were being cut short. Her social media accounts were being monitored. The mansion, once a palace, was beginning to feel like a trap. She tried to brush the fear away, but it lingered. She knew something was terribly wrong. The final straw came when she tried to walk outside the compound to wave at a neighbor she once gossiped with, only for the gate to remain firmly locked. The security guard refused to open it. "Madam, Oga say make you no pass here again," he muttered. That night, she tiptoed toward Uche's door again. But this time, it was open slightly. She caught a glimpse of what she shouldn't have. Blueprints, black duffel bags, cash stacked like bricks, and a man injecting something into a cloth bag. Before she could even gasp, Uche turned around. Their eyes met. And for the first time in her life, Ifunanya saw the man she married. Not as a billionaire, not as Amara's stolen groom, not as her savior from shame, but as a devil whose secrets were too heavy for any woman to carry. Ifunanya didn't realize when the windows became walls. At first, she chalked it up to new privacy measures. But over time, it became clear. The entire mansion had become her prison. Every single phone call she made was interrupted halfway with static, followed by a knock on the door and a maid reminding her that Oga said no long calls. Her clothes, once freely chosen, were replaced by garments picked by his staff. Even her skincare products were switched, everything filtered, controlled, pre-approved. Her closest friends, especially those who weren't married into wealth or connected to Uche's empire, were suddenly unreachable. Visits were canceled. Plans were postponed. One day, she tried calling her mother, only to find the line had been blocked completely from her phone. Her sense of independence, already fragile, crumbled. She cried in the bathroom while the security camera blinked in the corner of her vanity mirror. Every room had eyes. She began to sense the red lights on the walls, the quiet hum of hidden CCTV. The guards, once greeting her as Madam, now barely acknowledged her. They responded only to Uche's voice. When she confronted him, he smiled, that same hollow smile, and told her, "This is the price of being safe." The words rang louder than any scream. What was she being protected from? Or rather, what was the world being protected from? Her reality warped. Time no longer had meaning. Morning came with hollow greetings from housemaids. Afternoon with isolation. Evening with silence. She paced the floors, touching the same walls over and over, wondering if the outside world even remembered her name. Once, she screamed into her pillow just to feel alive. The walls didn't echo back. The only time she was allowed out was with 2 other wives of powerful men, women draped in elegance, but whose smiles were too still, too rehearsed. They went to one elite restaurant where cameras flashed, and the world believed they were thriving. Behind those smiles, Ifunanya noticed scars, bruises hidden beneath lace sleeves, eyes that darted quickly. One of the women, Adiz, whispered to her in the restroom, "If you speak, they'll end you. If you stay silent, maybe you'll live." That moment felt like a mirror shattering in her soul. Ifunanya wasn't just caged, she was owned. And Uche, the man she thought she had won from her sister, wasn't a husband. He was a hunter. She laid on her bed that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what she had done to deserve this. But deep down she already knew. Ifunanya's desperation reached its peak the night she planned her escape. She had memorized the security guard's rotations. She had hidden her old SIM card behind the drawer panel in her room. She had stuffed one of Uche's keys into the back of her bra when he was drunk. It was raining heavily, masking her movements, as she tiptoed through the hallway like a shadow, her breath shallow. She reached the back exit, the one near the garage. Just as she placed the key into the lock, she felt a cold hand grab her wrist and slam her against the wall. Uche stood there, soaked, eyes bloodshot with fury. "Did you really think you could run?" he growled, his voice lower than thunder. Before she could speak, a heavy slap sent her spinning to the floor. He didn't stop there. He called two men, strangers with soulless eyes, and ordered them to teach her a lesson. She screamed, cried, begged, but her voice was swallowed by the rain and marble walls. Hours later, bruised and bloody, she lay on the floor of their bedroom, unable to move. Uche stood over her and said calmly, "Next time, I won't need anyone. I'll do it myself." Then he left. The air in the room felt poisonous. She dragged herself to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. Her face was barely recognizable. The girl who once laughed the loudest, posed the boldest, and stole a wedding with confidence, she was gone. All that remained was a woman trapped in a nightmare she willingly walked into. Days passed, and she wasn't allowed out of her room. Her food was slid in through the door like a prisoner. She slept with her eyes open, afraid someone would sneak in and finish the threat. When she was finally allowed to step out, her world was even smaller. Uche had installed new locks, changed all passwords, and blocked her family completely. Even her mother couldn't reach her. The staff treated her like a ghost. And Uche treated her like property, something useful but unworthy of freedom. "You belong to me now. Your silence keeps you alive," he told her one evening as she sat trembling. Ifunanya looked into his eyes. There was no love there, no warmth, just power and control. She realized then, the man she thought she had stolen wasn't a blessing. He was a curse dressed in gold. Amara had learned the painful art of beginning again. Her heart, once torn and discarded like a forgotten letter, was no longer held together by memories of betrayal, but by the quiet, consistent decisions to forgive herself first. She didn't run from her pain, she walked through it. After the disgraceful arrest and the stolen wedding, Amara retreated from the noise of society and into something slower, something sacred. She took a job at a local children's learning center and began tutoring again. Her days were filled with dusty chalkboards, small eager hands, and curious faces. The innocent laughter of the children reminded her of a time before pain, before Uche, before Ifunanya. She didn't talk about what had happened. She just lived through it. Every sunrise that didn't hurt as much was a victory. Every smile that didn't feel forced was a step forward. In the quietness, Amara became more. She became someone who no longer waited for closure from others. She didn't seek apologies or explanations. Her past had already taken enough from her. She would not let it take her future too. Though she had forgiven Ifunanya in her heart, she hadn't forgotten. There was something about betrayal by blood that dug deeper than any wound. She had once trusted her sister with secrets, with laughter, with life. Now, when she looked at old pictures of them as girls, she felt the echo of a bond that had been destroyed not by accident, but by intention. She kept her distance. Ifunanya had made her choice, and Amara made hers. It was a lonely kind of peace, but it was still peace. What she didn't expect, though, was the unsettling quiet from Ifunanya's end. The sister who once updated her status every 2 hours, who posted selfies from every restaurant in the city, had suddenly gone silent. At first, Amara thought it was guilt. Maybe Ifunanya was simply hiding from the world, letting the shame of her betrayal consume her. But the silence lasted too long. No new photos. No public events. No tagged appearances. It was strange. Friends began asking Amara if she had seen her sister. "Is she okay?" one of Ifunanya's old friends asked. "She doesn't return calls." Amara brushed it off, replying, "She's probably just overwhelmed with married life." But a small flicker of concern had begun to light up in her chest. Something wasn't right. But even then, she couldn't bring herself to reach out. Not after everything. Not after being locked up like a criminal for a crime she never committed. If Ifunanya was hiding, perhaps it was well-deserved. Or perhaps it was something else. Something deeper. Something darker. Still, Amara stayed silent, for now. Time continued to march forward, and Ifunanya remained a ghost. Amara didn't want to admit it, but the silence had become deafening. It wasn't just social media silence now, it was complete withdrawal. Not a single word from their parents about visits. No casual appearances at family functions. No show at her cousin's wedding. It was as if Ifunanya had vanished. People began to whisper, but no one dared say what they suspected. The glamour Ifunanya once thrived on had disappeared into a shadow. Amara found herself battling with two truths. One, that her sister had hurt her beyond words. And two, that she was still her sister. That conflict haunted her. She'd sit alone in her room at night, remembering Ifunanya's wild laugh, her annoying habits, her dramatic flair. What had become of her? Then came the night her mother called, her voice cracking like a fragile pot on the stove. "Please, Amara, just visit her. Something is wrong." Amara had heard the desperation. Her mother's calls had grown frequent. "She doesn't talk to us. Her phone rings, but no one answers. And when we go to the gate, the guards say she's not available." Her father had even tried going in person, but was denied entry. Amara was stunned. What kind of home refused entry to family? The more they pushed, the more uncomfortable Amara became. A part of her wanted to ignore it. Let her sister reap what she had sown. But another part, the part still stitched to shared childhoods, to shared laughter, couldn't completely turn away. After many refusals, she finally agreed to visit. The mansion was more intimidating than she remembered. Security was tighter. Cameras more obvious. Amara's heart pounded as the gates opened and she was escorted inside. Uche welcomed her with the same calm, calculating charm he always had, but it felt thinner now, like a mask hiding a much colder face beneath. "You're welcome," he said, eyes unreadable. "She's upstairs." Ifunanya descended slowly, wearing a long-sleeved gown despite the heat. Her face was pale, her lips cracked, and her once bold eyes looked like shallow puddles. "Amara," she whispered, smiling faintly. But Amara wasn't fooled. She saw the bruises hiding beneath foundation, the tension in her body, the way she glanced sideways at Uche before speaking. "I fell clumsy me," Ifunanya said about her bruises. Amara nodded, pretending to believe her. But she knew. Something was very, very wrong. Amara returned home with heaviness she couldn't shake. She didn't speak much about what she saw, not even to her parents. But it haunted her. That wasn't her sister upstairs in that mansion. That was a shadow, a puppet reciting lines she'd been fed. And Uche, there was something in his eyes. A silence too well practiced. A calm too unnatural. Her parents noticed her change. "What did you see?" her father asked one morning over tea. "Is she okay?" Amara simply said, "She's breathing." It was the only truth she could offer, without opening wounds she didn't know how to explain. Her parents begged again and again, hoping for some way to understand their daughter's withdrawal. But Amara, out of deep suspicion and careful instinct, advised them to stay away. "Just pray," she whispered. "Something isn't right." Weeks passed. Amara tried to move on, pouring herself into work, into the children she taught. But at night, Her thoughts returned to Ifunanya's eyes. She remembered the small tremble in her sister's hand, the way she flinched at unexpected sounds. It wasn't guilt that haunted her sister, it was fear. Something was happening inside that mansion, something sinister. Amara didn't know the details, but her spirit sensed danger. She wanted to act. She wanted to ask questions. But she also remembered the betrayal, the arrest, the stolen vows. That bitterness pulled her back. She made her bed, she would whisper to herself. Let her lie in it. And yet, something deep within her refused to stay quiet. Even if her sister had destroyed everything, did she really deserve to suffer in silence? The day came when her father showed up at her flat with tears in his eyes. I dreamt of her crying, he said. Not once. Not twice. 3 times. That broke something in Amara. She told him she would go back, but this time she wouldn't call. She would go, unannounced. No warning. No heads up. Just a knock at the door. Her father held her hand and nodded. Be careful, he said. Amara packed lightly and left before dawn. The road to the mansion was longer than she remembered. As she sat in the car, her heart beat with dread. This wasn't just a visit, it was a mission. Something told her that what she would find this time would change everything. Amara arrived at the mansion unannounced, her heart pounding like a hammer inside her chest as the guards looked her over. She had dressed modestly and kept her presence calm, masking her growing suspicion with a soft smile. Tell her it's Amara, she said firmly. The guards exchanged glances, hesitated, and one of them finally disappeared inside. Minutes later, the tall gates creaked open and she was led to the parlor. As she waited, her eyes scanned the room, opulent chandeliers, sparkling tiles, pristine curtains. But no warmth. The home felt like a museum, beautiful but lifeless. When Uche emerged, he was dressed in a traditional white senator outfit, his face freshly shaved, his hands clasped behind his back like a priest preparing to bless a funeral. Welcome, Amara, he said with a cool smile that never reached his eyes. You didn't call. His words, though polite, felt like a warning. I wanted to surprise my sister, Amara replied smoothly, though her insides twisted. Uche nodded and gestured toward the staircase. She's upstairs resting. Amara made her way up with a guard behind her like a shadow. When Ifunanya appeared at the top landing, Amara gasped silently. Her sister had lost weight. Her eyes looked dull, shoulders hunched, as if she was bearing a weight no one could see. The long sleeves again, the carefully painted smile. Sister, Ifunanya said faintly, embracing her. But Amara could feel it, the tension in her touch, the way her body flinched ever so slightly. They sat in a room, a lavish guest chamber that felt more like a golden cage than a place of comfort. Ifunanya spoke in a flat, rehearsed tone. Marriage is fine. Uche is busy with work. I fell the other day, but I'm fine now. She forced a chuckle, but it died quickly. Amara looked at her, searching her eyes, and saw it. The silent scream. The unspoken desperation. She wanted to say something, anything, but she knew they were being watched. There was a small glass bulb in the corner that looked like a decorative camera. Every word could be recorded, every move monitored. So Amara sat, smiled faintly, and spoke of irrelevant things, the weather, a recipe she tried, the children at the center. But beneath her calm voice, her thoughts raced like wildfire. She noticed a mark behind Ifunanya's ear, hastily covered with foundation. Her sister's fingers trembled each time she took a sip of water. When Amara finally rose to leave, Ifunanya hugged her tightly, too tightly, and whispered so softly it was barely audible. Please don't come again unless you have to for your own safety. That alone confirmed everything. Amara left that mansion with her soul on fire. Her sister was a prisoner, and the man who once swore to love her was the jailer. After the unannounced visit, Uche's fury exploded like a volcano. He stormed into the room and slammed the door behind him, his face a terrifying mask of cold rage. Ifunanya stood frozen, knowing she had done nothing wrong, yet knowing the punishment was already decided. I warned you, Uche said, voice low but trembling with violence. I told you to act normal. One slip, just one mistake, and you drag me into danger." Ifunanya tried to explain that she did everything as instructed, but her words only poured oil on the fire. He slapped her so hard she fell sideways into the dresser, a cut blooming on her forehead. She didn't scream. She had learned not to. He dragged her to the hidden room in the basement, the soundproof one, and locked her in for 3 days. No food, no light, only the cold stone floor and her sobs. Her body ached, but her spirit ached more. Was this the reward for chasing luxury? For envying her sister's peaceful life? In the darkness, her mind wandered to memories she had buried, of the days when she and Amara would walk barefoot to church, sharing fufu from one bowl. She remembered laughing so hard she cried, back when they had nothing but each other. And now, she had everything but herself. The silence she had chosen, to lie, to steal, to watch Amara be dragged away in shame, had become her own personal hell. Now she couldn't even scream, because her voice no longer belonged to her. It belonged to Uche, to the evil enterprise he ran behind those elegant doors. She knew what he was doing now. She had seen the coded meetings, the crates that never opened, the children that arrived but never left. But she couldn't speak, because he would kill her, and maybe kill Amara too. The weight of it crushed her. Every day she lived in that mansion, she died a little more. When she was finally let out, she collapsed into bed. The maids were forbidden to speak to her. The guards ignored her. She was allowed outside once a week under the supervision of a friend, but not just any friend. They were all wives of other men in Uche's ring. No one spoke about their husbands. Just makeup, handbags, fashion. A carefully constructed reality. Ifunanya played along, not because she enjoyed it, but because it was survival. She thought of escaping again, but the memory of her last attempt still lived on her skin, in the bruises and the nightmares. She thought of Amara. If anyone could save her, it was her sister. But would she even try? After all, Ifunanya had been the reason Amara was once caged, once disgraced. Maybe this was her karma. Maybe this was her cross. But even in her lowest moments, a tiny part of her still hoped someone would hear her silent scream. Amara hadn't planned to return, but the dreams came back. Vivid, terrifying dreams of her sister in chains, of screams echoing through cold halls, of shadows behind smiling faces. She woke up one morning, trembling, and decided she needed to know the truth, no matter how ugly. So she returned. But this time, she came unannounced again. Early in the morning, before the house staff had time to prepare the charade. She parked far away and walked to the estate on foot, slipping past the first gate as a delivery van was leaving. She hid behind the servant quarters, her breath shallow, her eyes sharp. She didn't come to talk. She came to see. What she saw changed everything. Through a narrow passage near the back of the compound, Amara saw 2 armed men leading 3 small children, blindfolded, quiet, and terrified, into a van parked behind the kitchen entrance. The men moved quickly, efficiently. No noise. No hesitation. The children didn't resist. They looked drugged or simply too frightened to fight. The van had tinted windows and no license plates. Amara's heart nearly stopped. This wasn't just abuse. This was evil. This was a nightmare buried beneath silk bedsheets and marble floors. She froze in her hiding spot, tears pouring down her cheeks. Uche, the man she once loved, the man who promised her forever. This was who he really was, a devil in designer clothes, a monster disguised as a husband. And her sister was trapped in the belly of this darkness. Amara didn't stay long. She knew if she was caught, she would vanish, just like those children. She crept away, hands shaking, mind unraveling. Her legs carried her home on their own. Once inside her small flat, she locked the door and collapsed on the floor, sobbing so violently it felt like her body was purging poison. What should she do? Who would believe her? And how much time did she have before something irreversible happened? But one thing was clear. She couldn't pretend anymore. She couldn't say, "It's none of my business." Not when someone's life, maybe dozens of lives, were at stake. Her sister needed saving. And even though she had once betrayed her, Amara was not like her. She still had a conscience. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to become the sister Ifunanya never was. Amara did not sleep that night. Her eyes remained open, staring at the ceiling while thoughts of children being smuggled through a mansion haunted her mind like ghosts. She replayed every moment. The armed guards, the blindfolded children, the silence, the swiftness. Her heart ached, not just for them, but for her sister, Ifunanya, who lived in the midst of it, caged like a bird, but dressed like a queen. The fear in Ifunanya's eyes the last time they met made more sense now. It wasn't just marital trouble. It was terror, the kind that crawled under your skin and refused to leave. Amara walked to her small kitchen and poured herself a glass of water, hands trembling so hard it spilled. "What do I do now?" she whispered to herself. She was just a teacher, not a police officer, not a spy. Who would listen to her if she said a billionaire was trafficking children from his mansion? Worse, what if someone heard her and decided she was a threat? Amara knew she couldn't go to the authorities without evidence. She had nothing but a memory of what she saw, and even that was dangerous. The kind of men Uche worked with could make her disappear in seconds. Still, the thought of doing nothing tore at her. She remembered the young boy holding her skirt years ago during community tutoring, crying because he hadn't eaten all day. Children like him were the ones Uche preyed on, voiceless, helpless, abandoned. Amara couldn't be another adult who turned away. But she needed to be smart. She started jotting notes, dates, times, descriptions, everything she could remember from her short but scarring visit. She drew a rough layout of the mansion from memory and marked the passageway where the children were led. Her hands were steadier now. The fear had not left, but it had met a stronger companion, purpose. She didn't know how yet, but she was going to expose him. The next morning, Amara called a trusted friend, Mfan, a former journalist who had gone off-grid after exposing a corrupt government scheme. Mfan was skeptical at first, but the moment Amara mentioned the children, he fell silent. "You saw this with your own eyes?" he asked. "Yes," Amara replied, "and I'll go back if I have to." Mfan warned her against it, but he agreed to help gather information discreetly. They devised a basic plan. He would research Uche's known businesses, offshore accounts, and political connections, while Amara would try to observe and document anything she could from the outside. They promised to speak only in person and never mention names over the phone. Amara knew this wasn't just about rescuing Ifunanya anymore. It was about stopping a monster. Still, deep in her soul, she prayed she wouldn't lose herself in the process. Because to take down Uche, she'd have to step into the shadows. In the following days, Amara moved with a calculated silence of someone walking on shattered glass. She went to work as usual, smiled at her students, laughed with parents, and maintained a routine that appeared perfectly ordinary. But behind that smile was a volcano of rage, fear, and determination. Her evenings were spent with Mfan, combing through documents, watching from a distance, and studying the back of Uche's mansion. Mfan had discovered several shell companies tied to foreign accounts. Their names meant nothing, but the money flowing through them was undeniable. Uche was laundering millions, possibly through child trafficking. One name kept appearing in connection with Uche's firm, a logistics company that claimed to transport humanitarian supplies, but had no real physical office. "They're ghosts," Mfan muttered. "That's why it works. They use real tragedy to cover real evil." Amara listened, taking mental notes, every revelation like a dagger carving through her heart. One evening, Amara returned to the mansion's vicinity. This time, she hid near the garden fence, close enough to hear low voices and the sound of crates being moved. She brought a small phone with a video function and captured brief footage, blurry, shaky, but it showed masked men with guns escorting people into the side of the house. She couldn't make out faces, but she caught something more powerful. The sounds. Children whimpering. One of them whispering "Mama." It was enough to break her. She hurried away, nearly falling into a drainage ditch as tears blinded her path. She couldn't sleep that night. The sounds kept replaying. But for the first time, she had something real. She met Mfan the next morning and handed him the footage. He stared at her in silence for a long time, then simply said, "It's time." Together, they began compiling a report. Not for the police. Not yet. They needed to go higher, to federal enforcement that couldn't be easily bought or silenced. Mfan had a contact in the Department of Criminal Intelligence. "She's clean," he assured Amara. "If we can't trust her, then God help us." Meanwhile, Uche remained unaware. He had grown arrogant, too secure in his wealth and power. He thought everyone was afraid of him, and for good reason. He had turned silence into a weapon. But Amara was no longer afraid of silence. She had lived inside it, bled within it, and now she was using it to strike back. Every time she saw her sister's face in her mind, pale, thin, broken, her resolve grew. She would save her. She would save those children, even if it meant losing herself in the process. It was supposed to be a quick surveillance trip, in and out. Amara had returned near the mansion to film more footage for the report. This time, during a new drop-off, she had overheard Mfan discussing through intercepted chatter. She stayed low, hidden in the weeds near a maintenance shed behind the estate. Her phone was ready. The van came like clockwork, headlights dimmed. The guards opened the back quietly, and 3 teenagers stumbled out, their hands tied, their faces covered. Amara hit record, her fingers steady, her heart slamming like thunder in her chest. But just as she turned to crawl back, her foot slipped on loose gravel. A sharp metallic clang echoed. Enough. One of the guards turned. "Who's there?" he barked. Before she could run, a flashlight beam blinded her, and heavy boots thudded toward her position. Amara bolted, adrenaline carrying her through thick shrubs and over a low fence. But they were fast. A blow hit her from behind, knocking the breath out of her lungs. She fell hard, scraping her face against the ground. 2 men grabbed her arms roughly. One cursed. "You're the teacher. The one he warned us about." Panic gripped her throat. She fought like a cornered animal, kicking, biting, screaming until one of them struck her again, dazing her. "No witnesses," the taller one muttered, pulling out something from his waistband. But before he could act, a blinding light swept over them. Someone was coming. A car. Horns blared. Tires screeched. The men scattered into the bushes, disappearing like shadows. The vehicle belonged to Mfan, who had been watching nearby, sensing something might go wrong. He jumped out, helped her into the car, and sped off. Amara didn't speak. Her face was bleeding. Her dress was torn. But her phone, it was still in her pocket, still recording. Back at Mfan's hideout, he treated her wounds silently. His hands were gentle, but his eyes were full of restrained rage. "This is bigger than we thought," he said finally. "They're watching you now. We need to finish this before they silence you for good." Amara nodded weakly. She had almost died. Her body ached, her soul trembled. But she had proof. Real proof. And she wasn't stopping now. In that moment of pain and near death, she realized something terrifying and beautiful. Fear would never leave her, but courage had finally arrived to stay. The next steps would be deadly. But it was no longer just about her or her sister. It was about the innocent lives she had seen. And if it cost her everything, then so be it. The night she nearly died was also the night she truly began to live, with purpose, and with war in her spirit. The room was darker than usual. Ifunanya sat on the edge of her bed with her arms tightly wrapped around her knees, rocking gently back and forth, as though trying to soothe the storm inside her. She hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were hollow, and her skin looked dull despite the layers of makeup she was forced to wear during Uche's occasional photo ops. The bruises hadn't fully healed. She still flinched at the sound of footsteps, especially when Uche entered without knocking. But tonight, the terror wasn't just for herself, it was for Amara. Hours ago, one of the guards, who had helped drag her from the soundproof room, whispered, "Your sister was seen near the back fence." Uche is furious. Ifunanya froze. She didn't even realize tears were pouring until they touched her lips. Amara, that woman who had every right to hate her, to abandon her, was risking her life again. For what? For her? She couldn't bear it. When Uche returned that night, she rushed to his side, dropping to her knees, sobbing. "Please, please don't hurt her. Don't touch my sister," she cried, her voice hoarse and trembling. But Uche, dressed in silk pajamas, simply stood above her, watching with bored disinterest. "Why you care so much about someone who wants to destroy us?" he asked coldly. "Because she's all I have left," Ifunanya whispered, barely audible. "She's better than me. She always was." Uche didn't answer. Instead, he slapped her hard, sending her crashing to the cold floor. "One more word," he growled, "and I'll make sure the world never hears from either of you again." Then he ordered the guards to lock her back inside the soundproof chamber, the same room where sunlight had never touched and her screams went unheard. The heavy door slammed shut, and once again, silence became her only companion. Inside the cold box of despair, Ifunanya's heart shattered. She curled into a corner, her body aching from punishment, but her soul weeping even louder. She thought about the path that brought her here, how her envy had led her to steal the one person who ever truly loved her sister, how her greed made her blind to Uche's darkness until it was too late. Her mind drifted to their childhood. She remembered the church uniforms they once shared, the nights Amara protected her from bullies, the mornings she'd braid Amara's hair while teasing her about being too holy. Now Amara was out there, fighting battles Ifunanya helped create. Shame swallowed her. The pain was unbearable. But what hurt most was the realization that the sister she betrayed was the only person brave enough to save her. If she survived this, she vowed silently in the dark, she would tell the truth. All of it, even if it cost her everything. Amara sat at her modest wooden table, Mfan beside her, both surrounded by documents, memory cards, and scribbled notes. Her face was still healing, the bandage barely covering the deep cut near her cheekbone. But her eyes burned with determination. She flipped through the photos they had printed, images of mass guards, grainy footage of children being ushered into vans, screenshots of Uche's offshore financial transactions. It was all there, scattered before her like puzzle pieces waiting to destroy a monster. But what brought it all together wasn't just the footage or the recordings. It was a journal, old, tattered, and soaked in dry tears. It was Ifunanya's. Amara had found it accidentally in the guest bedroom during her last visit. She had tucked away, unsure of what to do with it, until now. Reading through the journal broke her heart all over again. Ifunanya's words weren't filled with vanity or pride. They were desperate, sorrowful entries of a woman drowning in luxury and imprisoned by terror. She wrote about the first time Uche hit her, how she thought it was her fault for questioning him. She described the days she wasn't allowed to leave, the guards who followed her to the bathroom, the camera she discovered hidden in her wardrobe. There was even an entry about how Uche had faked a business trip just to eliminate one of his own men who had seen too much. Every page was a window into a nightmare. Amara wept silently, reading how Ifunanya regretted taking Chuka from her, how she believed she had been cursed by her own greed. The entries grew more broken, more desperate, until the final words were almost illegible. He said he would kill her. "I don't want my sister to die for me." That was enough. It had to be. With trembling hands, Amara packed the photos, the USB with video footage, and the journal into a sealed envelope. Mfan added a signed summary of their findings. It was time. He made a call to his contact, a woman named DSP Obianuju, a federal criminal investigator known for being incorruptible and fierce. They agreed to meet in a neutral location. At dawn, Amara stood at the roadside, watching as the black SUV pulled in. Obianuju stepped out, tall, no-nonsense, and armed with questions. Amara handed her the envelope without a word. She had done what she could. Her heart was pounding, her stomach in knots. Obianuju flipped through the contents, nodding slowly. "We move within 48 hours, she said. Amara nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Please don't let him hurt her again." Obianuju looked her straight in the eye. "We'll get them both out, and he'll pay." It happened just after midnight, under a moon cloaked in clouds and an air thick with justice long delayed. Black SUVs moved silently across the private road leading to Uche's estate, their engines quiet but their purpose roaring. At the front of the convoy was DSP Obianuju, armored and ready. The men with her were not the usual uniformed police. They were elite federal agents, trained to strike without warning and with precision. Inside the mansion, Uche sat in his private lounge sipping wine, completely unaware. His guards were relaxed, most of them on payroll and half asleep. No one expected trouble. No one believed someone like him, rich, connected, protected, could ever be touched. But tonight, the silence he had built his kingdom upon was about to crumble. The gates didn't open gently. They were rammed. Steel cracked. Chaos erupted. Screams rang out from within the compound. Guards scrambled, some drawing weapons, but they were quickly overpowered. Obianuju led the way, her voice sharp and commanding. Secure the west wing. Room by room. They stormed in, clearing hallways, bursting into rooms. They found rooms converted into cells. Some children were tied, others sedated, one barely breathing. Officers shouted for medics. The house of glass Uche had built now splintered under the weight of truth. Upstairs, Ifunanya lay curled on her bed, unaware that her nightmare was ending. A female officer found her, gently shaking her awake. "You're safe now," she whispered. Ifunanya blinked in disbelief. "My sister, did she?" The officer only smiled and nodded. She never stopped trying. Ifunanya broke down, her tears not of fear this time, but relief. Uche tried to run. He slipped through a secret passage, aiming for the dock behind his estate. But they were waiting. He was dragged out, kicking and cursing. When he saw Obianuju, he sneered, "You'll regret this. I have people everywhere." She didn't even flinch. "So do I. And none of them are buying children." That was the end of it. Uche was cuffed, pushed into the back of a van, and driven into the night, not to luxury, but to rot. Outside the gates, Amara stood, shaking, watching the mansion from afar. She wasn't allowed inside, not yet. But when she saw the children carried out, wrapped in blankets, and Ifunanya, frail, tear-streaked, whispering her name, she fell to her knees. The battle was over, for now, and the silence that once tormented her had finally spoken loud enough to bring a kingdom down. The courtroom was cold, not because of the air conditioning, but because of the weight of what it had seen. Uche sat in the dock in a crisp white shirt, ironed perfectly by the same hands he once used to torment. His expression was unreadable, as if even now he believed he could manipulate the world with silence. The media had erupted with the story of his fall, billionaire kingpin exposed, mansion of tears, the man behind the missing. Every major station covered the trial, and victims' families had filled the courtroom, some sobbing, some staring through him with hatred. But the person he seemed to search for wasn't among them. Amara wasn't in the public gallery. She didn't come to watch his downfall. She had no interest in revenge, only peace. Witness after witness came forward. A former housekeeper described the screams she used to hear in the night, silenced by bribes. One of the rescued boys identified Uche's voice as the one who warned him to keep quiet or lose his tongue. The prosecution read aloud Ifunanya's journal entries, which Amara had submitted. When her handwriting was projected on a large screen, words soaked in desperation and pain. Gasps filled the room. "I sleep with one eye open. I hear footsteps and freeze. I am married to fear." That line echoed in every heart that day. When Obianuju took the stand, her testimony was final and firm. He used power as a veil. But evil always leaks through its seams. And this time we caught it. Uche's defense crumbled under the weight of truth. No bribe could save him. His frozen stare broke only once, when Ifunanya entered to testify. Thin, still healing, but standing tall in front of the man who destroyed her. Her voice trembled, but every word stabbed like a sword. "I thought I was marrying a man who loved me. Instead, I became a prisoner. And I will forever live with the guilt of bringing him into our lives." Uche flinched at that, not because he cared, but because, for the first time, someone who once worshipped him stood as his accuser. By the end of her testimony, There were no dry eyes. When the judge finally declared the life sentence, no one cheered. No applause. Just silence, the kind that only justice can bring. And far away, Amara stood by her window, staring at the sky, whispering, "It is finished." Ifunanya sat in her hospital room wrapped in layers, not just of clothing, but of trauma. The physical wounds were healing slowly, but the emotional scars bled invisible. Every creak of a door, every shadow in the hallway made her heart skip. Nurses came and went, kind and patient, but she barely responded. Her eyes stayed fixed on the window, the world outside too big, too loud, too fast. When Amara finally walked in, carrying a small flask of hot pepper soup and a Bible, Ifunanya didn't look up immediately. She was too ashamed, too broken, too unsure if she deserved the grace that entered with her sister. Amara sat down quietly and unpacked the food without a word. Then, gently, she reached across the bed and placed a hand on Ifunanya's. It took a moment, but eventually Ifunanya broke. The tears came first, then the sobs, then the words. "I destroyed everything," she choked out. "I took your happiness. I betrayed you. And then I almost died for a man who never loved me. I don't deserve you." Amara listened, her own tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. "You made mistakes," she replied softly. "Terrible ones. But I never stopped praying for you." Ifunanya pulled her into a trembling hug, one filled with years of pain, regret, and finally healing. But even as Amara forgave, something in her remained closed. Not out of hate, but self-preservation. She had walked through fire and come out stronger, but the memory of betrayal still lingered like a shadow. She didn't hate Ifunanya. She didn't wish her harm. But she couldn't go back to what they once were. The scars were too deep. "I forgive you," Amara whispered, "but some things they change us forever." Ifunanya nodded. She understood. As they sat in that room, holding hands like the sisters they once were, the silence between them spoke louder than words. A silence not of bitterness, but of two souls forever marked by a man they both once loved and lost. Months passed. The dust from the court case began to settle, and the city moved on with its usual rush. But for Amara, healing came quietly, gently, like morning dew on a wounded flower. She returned to her teaching, smiling again, laughing even. The children noticed. Her laughter no longer carried weight, but light. The pain hadn't vanished. It simply found a new room inside her, one she didn't visit as often anymore. And then, in the most unexpected way, love found her again. His name was Ease, a soft-spoken volunteer who helped at the youth center. He wasn't flashy, but he was kind. And Amara noticed something rare. He listened with his whole heart. Their first few dates were slow, quiet walks around her neighborhood. He didn't ask too many questions about her past. He didn't try to fix her. He simply showed up, consistently, tenderly, honestly. Amara, cautious but curious, found herself slowly leaning in. Ease would bring her books, help the children with their studies, and cook with her during weekends. One day, she found herself laughing so hard at one of his jokes that she had to sit down. It felt strange, foreign, beautiful. Love had returned, but not in a grand, dramatic entrance. It came like a whisper, like peace. When Ease proposed, he didn't get on one knee in front of a crowd. Instead, he handed her a handwritten note after dinner. It read, "You've known pain. Let me show you peace. Will you walk with me?" Amara cried, not because of fear, but because this time the answer came easy. Yes. The wedding was simple, just a few friends, children from her class, and a quiet ceremony under a mango tree. As she exchanged vows, she glanced at the back of the crowd. Ifunanya stood far off, smiling faintly with teary eyes. She had brought a small flower in her hand. She didn't try to steal the spotlight. She simply watched and finally understood what love really looked like. Not possession, not control, but freedom. Ifunanya returned to the mansion she once ruled, but it no longer felt like home. The rooms echoed with ghosts of her past, each corner reminding her of the woman she used to be and the man she once thought loved her. Uche's portraits had been taken down, but his presence still haunted the halls. The mirrors no longer reflected beauty or pride, only a deep sadness in her eyes that couldn't be masked with makeup. Her days were slow, mostly quiet, and often lonely. Friends she used to party with had disappeared. They weren't true friends, just echoes of a world built on money, envy, and deception. She had escaped Uche's physical prison, but the emotional cage remained. She was free, yes, but freedom without healing was a different kind of captivity. She tried to rebuild. She attended therapy sessions when she could, and read spiritual devotionals Amara had left for her after the trial. But nothing came easy. Sometimes she'd wake in the night, screaming. Sometimes she would stand outside, just staring into the distance, hoping to see a version of herself that no longer existed. She tried dating once, a kind man who worked in IT, but the moment he raised his voice during a minor disagreement, her hands trembled uncontrollably. She ran out crying, terrified. Her heart no longer understood how to trust. She wanted love, but love now reminded her of pain, betrayal, and chains. She watched romantic films and cried, not because of the happy endings, but because she doubted she'd ever have one. Despite everything, Ifunanya didn't blame the world anymore. She no longer envied her sister's peace. Instead, she admired it. She even visited Amara's youth center once in disguise, sitting quietly in the back as Amara taught kids how to dream again. She didn't speak. She just watched, her heart torn between guilt and pride. As she left, she wrote a note and dropped it at the front desk. It read, "You became the woman I could never be. Keep shining, even if from a distance." And that was the last time she visited. She went back to her own home, which she now called her quiet house, and continued her slow journey. She smiled more, cried less. But real joy? That still felt like something borrowed, not owned. She had built her world on another's pain, and even though she survived, she would always walk with a limp where her heart used to run. The sun was warm that morning. Amara walked through the quiet courtyard of her home with a little boy holding her hand. Her son, a child born not just of blood, but of healing. His eyes sparkled like Isa's, and his smile carried none of the pain she once held. She bent down and whispered something in his ear, and he laughed, breaking the silence like music. Her home was filled with life, not wealth or grandeur, but peace. Books lined the shelves, children played in the garden, and the smell of jollof rice drifted from the kitchen. She had rebuilt everything she lost, not in the same form, but better, stronger, wiser. The betrayal, the jail cell, the lost years, they were chapters, not conclusions. She had survived the fire and now wore its lessons like a crown. Once in a while, she thought about Ifunanya. She never hated her, not even after all the suffering. But she couldn't fully bring her back into her world either. Trust, like glass, once shattered, never returned whole. They exchanged messages once a month. Sometimes just a Bible verse, sometimes a single sentence. "I saw your smile in a newspaper photo. You looked beautiful." That was enough. Forgiveness had come, but closeness did not follow. And that was okay. Amara had learned that love and boundaries could exist together. She chose peace over resentment, distance over drama. Her soul no longer bled. It bloomed. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Amara sat on the front steps with Ease beside her. Their son played in the sand a few feet away. Ease held her hand and asked, "Do you ever think about the past?" Amara smiled gently. "Sometimes. But I don't live there anymore." Far away, in another neighborhood, Ifunanya stood by her window, watching a child play in the street. Not hers, just a neighbor's, and tears welled up in her eyes. She wasn't crying out of bitterness anymore. She was mourning what she could have been if envy hadn't ruled her heart. She whispered to herself, "Silence cost me everything. But maybe I still have tomorrow." And as the night grew quiet again, two sisters lived on apart, but alive. One in full bloom, one still finding her roots. The vow was broken, the pain endured, the silence chosen, but love, in the end, still had the final word. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel Tochi Stories for more.